They said I was washed up, a relic wheezing through checkout lines, clinging to commission scraps. Kelsey positioned her phone like a weapon, documenting my decline for her audience of amateur moralists. She thought exposure would break me, force me to surrender what she believed she deserved. But in 40 years of closing deals, I learned one ironclad rule: the contract isn't over until someone reads the fine print. And Kelsey never read hers. The morning she arrived, I was in the garage sorting through Ruth's old canning jars. The glass had that cloudy patina that comes from decades of use and washing, each jar a different size because Ruth never threw anything away if it still held liquid without leaking. My knees ached from squatting on the concrete floor, the cold had seeped through my jeans into the joints, that deep bone chill that stays with you even after you stand up. I heard her car before I saw it. That particular engine hum of a new vehicle, smooth and expensive, nothing like the throaty rattle of my truck that announced itself 3 blocks away. When I straightened up, my lower back sent a sharp complaint up my spine. 72 years of gravity taking its cut. Kelsey's white crossover pulled into the driveway with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to park carefully to avoid door dings because the insurance will cover it anyway. She had her phone out before the engine shut off. The screen glowed in her hand, angled toward me through the windshield. Recording. The red dot in the corner of the camera interface was visible even from 15 feet away. I set down a quart jar that still smelled faintly of pickles and tomatoes, waited. She emerged from the car wearing athleisure, that's what they call it now, synthetic fabric that wicks moisture and costs more per yard than Ruth's Sunday dress. Her sneakers were pristine white, the kind that have never touched actual dirt. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That professional warmth people use when they're performing empathy for an audience rather than feeling it for a person. "Uncle Frank, we need to talk about your living situation." Her voice carried that bright, careful tone you'd use with a child who'd wet himself in public. She walked up the driveway holding the phone at chest height, making sure to capture my flannel shirt with the oil stain on the pocket, my work pants with the frayed cuffs, the garage behind me with its peeling paint and rust blooms on the metal shelves. "People are worried about you." I wiped my hands on my thighs. The denim was rough, stiff from too many washes without fabric softener. "What people?" "Family. Friends. Mom says you've been forgetting to pay bills. Dad saw you at the grocery last week, and you couldn't remember where you parked." Her phone never wavered. The lens stared at me like a judge's eye. "We think it might be time to discuss your options." The cough started in my chest, that deep rattle that comes from 40 years of cigarettes and the dust of 1,000 job sites. I'd quit smoking 6 years ago when Ruth died, but the damage was permanent, scored into my lungs like markings on a debt ledger. I let it run its course. Didn't cover my mouth. Let Kelsey's camera capture every wheeze and hack. When I caught my breath, my throat burned, raw. I tasted copper. What options are those? The property, Uncle Frank. The land. It's becoming too much for you to manage, and honestly, it would be better for everyone if we consolidated family assets now rather than waiting for a crisis. She pulled papers from her purse, one of those designer bags with the interlocking letters that signal status to people who care about such things. The papers were folded in thirds, crisp. I had my lawyer draft something simple. Just a transfer of your stake to Dad. You'd still have full access, of course. The paper stock was heavy when I took it. Cotton fiber, the expensive kind people use for resumes and official documents. 24-pound weight at minimum. The text was laser-printed, sharp edges on every letter. My hands shook when I held it, not as much as they actually do when the arthritis flares, but I let the tremor show more than I usually allow. "Let me think about it. Uncle Frank, I'm trying to help you here. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." She said it with that edge of frustration creeping in, the tone people use when their target isn't following the script. Behind her, a neighbor's dog barked. The Henderson's German Shepherd that spent all day chained to a post in their yard, barking at everything that moved because it had nothing else to do. I understood that dog. I watched Kelsey walk back to her car, phone still recording, capturing my stooped posture in the garage doorway, the mess of jars and boxes behind me, the visual evidence of a man losing his grip on ordinary life. Her taillights flashed red as she backed out. Then she was gone, and I was alone with the glass jars and the oil stains and the cold concrete under my boots. Inside the house, I made coffee in the percolator Ruth bought the year before she passed. 1987 model, the kind with the glass bubble on top where you watch the coffee darken as it brews. The plug was frayed where it met the base, electrical tape held the wires together. I'd been meaning to replace the cord for 4 years but hadn't gotten around to it. The familiar gurgling sound filled the kitchen. I stood at the counter and waited, feeling the warmth rise from the machine, smelling the bitter bite of the grounds as the water cycled through them. My hands still shook, but now it was from something other than arthritis. Not anger. Anger was hot and impulsive. This was colder. A tightening in my chest, a clarity in my vision. The feeling you get when you realize a negotiation has moved from discussion to warfare. I pulled my files from the hall closet. They were in a fireproof box I'd bought from a surplus store in 2003, gray metal with a keyed lock. Inside were the documents I'd kept organized for 25 years. Not because I expected to need them. Because a man who spent 4 decades in sales knows that the most important contracts are the ones people forget they signed. The original property deed was on top. Davidson County, North Carolina. Recorded January 14, 1982. Thomas Raymond Delaney and Frank Joseph Delaney, joint tenants with right of survivorship. 47 acres. Purchased price, $89,000. We'd split it 50-50. Tom and I. Brothers. Partners. The land was supposed to be our retirement, the thing we'd leave to our kids. Beneath the deed was the promissory note. December 14, 1998. I remembered signing it because it was Ruth's birthday and I'd left her Christmas shopping at the mall to meet Tom at the bank. The paper was yellowed now, but the text was still sharp. Principal amount, $180,000. Interest rate, 8% annually, compounding monthly. Collateral, Thomas Raymond Delaney's 50% ownership stake in Davidson County parcel number 4782-91-3384. Tom's restaurant was failing. He needed cash to pay suppliers, to make payroll, to keep the doors open long enough to turn it around. He never turned it around. The restaurant closed 18 months later. Tom made 3 payments on the note. I had the canceled checks in the file, then stopped. We never spoke about it again. Family, he'd said when I'd asked about the 4th payment. We take care of each other. I'd let it go because Ruth believed family mattered more than money, and I believed Ruth. But Ruth was dead, and Kelsey was trying to take what was mine while filming my humiliation for 47,000 strangers. I pulled out my calculator. Texas Instruments, the kind with the solar panel and the hard plastic buttons that click when you press them. I'd bought it in 1993, used it for every estimate and bid and commission calculation since. The screen was scratched but readable. Principal, $180,000. Rate, 8% annual. Compounding, monthly. Time, 25 years. I ran the numbers twice to be certain. The total came to $847,293.67. The land was currently assessed at $1.2 million according to the county tax records I'd pulled last month. My original 50% plus Tom's defaulted portion meant I legally owned approximately 73% of the entire property. They'd been living on my land. Farming my fields. Planning their futures with my asset. And now Kelsey wanted me to sign it away while her camera documented my senility for an audience that would applaud her compassion. I poured coffee into Ruth's favorite mug, the one with the faded rooster on the side. The ceramic was chipped along the rim. I drank it black, feeling the heat spread through my chest, the bitterness coat my tongue. Outside, the afternoon light slanted through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes that drifted in the air. Everything was very quiet. Very clear. I wasn't angry. I was calibrating. Calculating. In 40 years of sales, I'd learned that the best time to close a deal is when the other party thinks they've already won. You let them commit. Let them celebrate. Let them go on record with their intentions. Then you show your cards. Kelsey had just committed. On camera. For hundreds of thousands of people to witness. Now I just needed to let her dig deeper. 3 days after Kelsey's garage performance, I received an email notification. Her video had gone live. The subject line in my inbox read, new post from Kelsey Marie Lifestyle, when family members won't accept help. I clicked through on my laptop, the old Dell that took 40 seconds to load a web page because the processor was from 2009 and I'd never bothered upgrading. The video opened with soft piano music, the kind they use in pharmaceutical commercials. Kelsey's face filled the screen, lit from the front with one of those ring lights that make everyone look younger and more sincere. Her voice was gentle, pained. Today I want to talk about something really difficult. My Uncle Frank is 72 years old, and he's struggling. The video cut to footage of me in the garage. The camera angle made me look smaller, hunched. My cough sounded worse in the recording than it had felt in my chest. She'd isolated the audio, amplified it. My hands shook as I held her papers. The tremor looked violent, uncontrolled. Kelsey's voiceover continued, "He's forgetting to pay bills. He can't remember where he parked his car. Last week I found 3 months of unopened mail in his house, including shut-off notices from the electric company." The video had been posted for 6 hours. It already had 43,000 views, 1,800 comments, 600 shares. I scrolled through the comments. "Poor man, someone needs to step in before he hurts himself. This is elder abuse, letting him live alone like that. You're doing the right thing, Kelsey. So brave of you to share this." My coffee had gone cold in the mug. I was sitting at Ruth's kitchen table, the one we'd bought at a yard sale in 1979 for $35. The surface was scarred with knife marks and water rings, the finish worn down to bare wooden spots where our elbows had rested for decades. The chair creaked under my weight. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock Ruth had hung above the sink. I saved the video to my hard drive. Evidence. Then I opened my spreadsheet, the one I'd been maintaining since 1998, the year Tom signed the note. Every payment he'd made was logged. 3 entries total. January 15, 1999, $2,000. March 20, 1999, $2,000. May 30, 1999, $2,000. Then nothing. 24 years and 7 months of nothing. The compounding interest had grown like a living thing, feeding on itself, doubling and redoubling. I'd tracked it monthly, watching the number climb, never mentioning it to Tom because Ruth asked me not to. "It's family, Frank," she'd said when I showed her the missed payments. "Money isn't worth losing your brother." But Ruth hadn't understood the principle at stake. This wasn't about money. It was about the difference between a gift and a loan, between charity and contract. Tom had signed his name. Had posted his property as collateral. Had made a legal promise he'd chosen not to keep. And now his daughter was trying to steal what he'd forfeited, using my own mortality as leverage. I drove to the county recorder's office on Monday morning. The building was downtown, old brick construction from the 1930s with marble floors worn smooth by decades of foot traffic. The air inside smelled like old paper and floor wax. My boots squeaked on the polished stone. The clerk was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She had the tired efficiency of someone who'd processed the same forms 10,000 times. "I need a certified copy of a deed," I told her. "Parcel number 4782-91-3384. She typed on her computer, squinting at the screen. "That'll be $15 for the search and certification." I paid in cash, 3 fives pulled from my wallet, the bills soft and creased from use. She printed the document on heavy paper with a raised seal, handed it across the counter. The deed confirmed what I already knew: joint ownership, recorded 1982, no subsequent transfers or liens except the promissory note filed in December of 1998. I folded the paper carefully and put it in the inside pocket of my jacket, felt its weight against my ribs. Next I went to see Robert Chen. His office was in a converted house on the east side, the kind of place where lawyers hang their shingles when they're good at what they do but don't need to impress clients with mahogany and leather. The waiting room had mismatched chairs and outdated magazines. Chen kept me waiting 7 minutes. I timed it on my watch, an old Timex with a cracked crystal that Ruth had given me for our 20th anniversary. When he called me back, his office smelled like coffee and printer toner. Chen was younger than me by 20 years, second-generation immigrant, sharp as a razor and half as forgiving. We'd worked together on a contract dispute in 2012. He'd saved me $30,000 by finding a loophole the other side's lawyer had missed. "Frank, good to see you. What brings you in?" I laid out the documents on his desk. The deed. The promissory note. The payment history. The current tax assessment. Kelsey's video on my phone, playing silently with subtitles enabled. Chen watched without expression. When the video ended, he leaned back in his chair. It creaked, cheap office furniture, the kind with hydraulic cylinders that fail after 5 years. "Your niece is building a public case for incompetency," he said. "She's documenting your supposed decline to justify intervention. And everything she's claiming is false," I said. I pulled out my bank statements, my paid bills, my medical records from my last checkup in September showing normal cognitive function. Chen leafed through them, nodding slowly. "So you want to sue for defamation?" "No," I said. "I want to collect on the debt. And I want to do it in a way that makes her document her own destruction." Chen smiled. It wasn't a warm expression. It was the smile of a man who enjoyed watching arrogance meet consequence. "Tell me what you're thinking." I laid it out for him. Let Kelsey escalate. Let her file a formal complaint, Adult Protective Services, competency hearing, whatever she wanted. Let her commit officially, on the record, with witnesses and court documents. Then I'd present the promissory note, the payment history, the compounded debt. I'd show that I wasn't a confused old man being protected by loving family. I was a creditor being defrauded by borrowers who decided silence meant forgiveness. Chen tapped his pen against his desk, thinking. It's risky. If the court finds you incompetent before you can present your evidence, you lose control of the assets. They won't find me incompetent, I said. Because I'm not. Chen looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were dark, calculating. He was deciding whether I was a client who understood the stakes or a stubborn old man about to make an expensive mistake. Finally, he nodded. Okay. But we do this right. Full documentation. Medical evaluation from an independent psychiatrist. Cognitive testing. Financial audit showing you're current on every obligation. When we walk into that courtroom, there can't be any doubt about your capacity. How long will that take? 2 weeks if we move fast. Can you stay quiet that long? Not react if she pushes harder. I thought about 40 years of sales calls. 40 years of listening to customers insult my products, question my integrity, waste my time with objections I'd heard 10,000 times before. 40 years of smiling and nodding and waiting for them to finish talking so I could close the deal. I can stay quiet, I said. Chen pulled out a legal pad and started writing. We're going to need affidavits from people who interact with you regularly. Neighbors, your doctor, anyone who can testify to your competence. And I'll need access to all your financial records for the past 5 years. We need to prove you're not just competent now, but that you've been managing your affairs properly the entire time Kelsey claims you were declining. I gave him my accountant's contact information, my doctor's name, the numbers for my bank and insurance company. Chen wrote it all down in neat columns, checking items off a mental list I couldn't see. One more thing, he said. When this goes to court, your brother is going to be there. Tom's going to have to testify about the loan, about why he stopped paying. Are you prepared for that? Tom made his choice, I said. 24 years ago when he decided family meant he could take my money without consequences. Now he gets to explain that choice to a judge. The thing in my chest wasn't anger. It was colder, harder. It was the feeling of a locked door, a decision made and sealed. Ruth would have wanted me to forgive, to let it go, to choose family over justice. But Ruth was 6 years dead, buried under a granite headstone I visited every Sunday, and forgiveness hadn't stopped Kelsey from trying to steal from me. Hadn't stopped Tom from living on my land like it was his. Hadn't done anything except teach them that patience was weakness and silence was permission. I was done being patient. Chen walked me to the door when we finished. His handshake was firm, professional. 2 weeks, Frank. Keep your head down, document everything, and don't engage with Kelsey no matter what she posts or says. Let her think she's winning. The best defense is a good ambush, I said. Chen laughed. That's not how the saying goes. It is in sales, I told him. And this is just another negotiation. I drove home through afternoon traffic, the sun low and orange through the windshield, casting long shadows across the road. My truck's engine rattled at idle, a sound I'd stopped hearing years ago because it was constant and familiar. The steering wheel was worn smooth where my hands rested, the vinyl cracked and split from decades of heat and cold. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked small and shabby in the failing light. Peeling paint. Sagging gutters. The roof shingles were curling at the edges, 10 years past when they should have been replaced. But it was mine. Paid off in 2006. Every beam and nail and square foot of foundation belonged to me, earned through 40 years of commission checks and overtime and doing without. Kelsey thought she could take it with a phone camera and a sympathetic audience. She thought documentation was power. But documentation cuts both ways. And I'd been documenting for 25 years. Kelsey called on Thursday afternoon. I was replacing a washer in the kitchen faucet when my phone buzzed on the counter. The rubber gasket was old, brittle, crumbling between my fingers like dried mud. I'd turned off the water at the main and the pipes were still dripping, that slow tick of residual pressure releasing drop by drop into the basin. I wiped my hands on a rag and answered. "Uncle Frank, it's Kelsey. We need to talk." "About what?" "About your situation. Dad and I have been discussing it, and we think it's time for a family meeting. Everyone together so we can figure out the best path forward." My hands were still damp, cold from the water. The kitchen window showed the backyard where Ruth's garden had gone to weeds 3 years ago. I hadn't had the energy to maintain it. The tomato cages were rusted, leaning at angles like drunks. "When?" I said. "Saturday afternoon. 2 o'clock. At Dad's house. We've invited someone who specializes in elder care transitions. Just to give us options. No pressure." I let the silence stretch. Outside, a crow landed on the fence post, black and sleek, watching the yard for movement. Its head twitched side to side, mechanical. "I'll be there," I said. "Thank you, Uncle Frank. This is really for the best." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, feeling the smooth plastic case under my thumb, the weight of it. The faucet dripped behind me. 1 drop. 2. 3. The rhythm was irregular, maddening. I finished the repair, tested the tap. The water flowed clear and steady, no leaks. Small victories. Saturday arrived cold and overcast, the kind of November day where the sky presses down like a weight and the light never gets brighter than twilight. I dressed carefully. My oldest jeans, the ones with the knees gone pale from wear. A flannel shirt Ruth had bought me in 1994, blue and gray check, the collar frayed soft. I hadn't shaved in 3 days. The stubble on my face was white, patchy. I looked in the bathroom mirror and saw an old man, tired, diminished. Perfect. I drove to Tom's house in my truck, the engine loud and rough. His place was 15 miles outside town, set back from the road on 5 acres of the original 47 we'd bought together. The house was newer construction, vinyl siding, double garage, professional landscaping. Tom had done well for himself after the restaurant failed. Went into insurance sales, built a client base, retired at 65 with a pension. All of it funded by the debt he'd never repaid. 3 cars were parked in the driveway when I arrived. Tom's silver sedan, Kelsey's white crossover, and a gray compact with a rental company barcode on the window. The care consultant, probably. I parked on the street and walked up the driveway slowly, favoring my right knee. The joint ached in the cold, genuine pain, but I exaggerated the limp. Made myself smaller. Older. The front door opened before I reached it. Tom stood in the entrance, backlit by the warm glow of interior lights. He was 2 years younger than me, 70, but he looked 55. Regular gym membership, good diet, hair plugs that fooled nobody but made him feel better. He wore khakis and a polo shirt, casual weekend wear that probably cost more than my entire outfit. "Frank, glad you could make it. Come in, come in." His voice was hearty, false. The voice of a man performing welcome while calculating cost. Inside, the house smelled like vanilla candles and new carpet. Everything was beige and cream and carefully neutral. Linda, Tom's wife, appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of cookies arranged in concentric circles. She'd always been a woman who believed presentation mattered more than substance. "Hi Frank," she said with that bright, careful smile. "We're so glad you're here." The living room had been staged for intervention. Chairs arranged in a circle, coffee table cleared except for a stack of brochures showing smiling elderly people in sunny common rooms. Kelsey sat on the sofa next to a woman in her 50s wearing business casual and an expression of professional sympathy. "This is Sharon Kimball," Kelsey said. "She's a licensed social worker who specializes in care transitions." Sharon stood and offered her hand. "Mr. Delaney, thank you for coming. I know these conversations can be difficult, but they're so important." Her hand was soft, moist. I shook it briefly and sat in the chair they'd positioned for me, the one that faced everyone else, that put my back to the window. Tom settled into his recliner, the good one with the lumbar support and the cup holder in the armrest. Linda perched on a dining chair she'd brought in from the kitchen. Kelsey had her phone out, not even pretending to hide it anymore. The lens was pointed at me. "Recording." "Frank," Sharon began, her voice gentle and slow like she was speaking to a child, "Kelsey and your brother have shared some concerns about your living situation. I'd like to talk about what kind of support might be helpful for you." I coughed. Let it rattle in my chest, wet and long. When I caught my breath, I said, "What kind of support?" "Well," Sharon glanced at her notes, written on a legal pad in handwriting too small for me to read from where I sat, "there are some questions about whether independent living is still the safest option. Have you had any falls recently? Any trouble with daily activities like cooking or managing medications?" "No falls," I said. "Sometimes I forget what day it is." Kelsey leaned forward. "Uncle Frank, Mom found unpaid bills in your mailbox last month. Electric, water, property tax. You're months behind on everything." That was a lie. I'd paid every bill on time for 40 years. But I didn't correct it. I let my face show confusion, uncertainty. "I thought I paid those." "You might think you did," Tom said, his voice taking on that patronizing edge, "but Frank, the records show you didn't. We're worried you're losing track of things." Sharon made a note on her pad. "Mr. Delaney, would you be open to having someone come by once or twice a week? Just to help with bills, maybe light housekeeping, meal preparation. That kind of thing." I looked down at my hands. They were spotted with age, veined, the knuckles swollen from arthritis. I let them tremble. "Maybe that would be good," I said quietly. The relief in the room was palpable. Tom exhaled. Linda smiled. Kelsey's eyes gleamed with something that wasn't quite compassion. Sharon nodded encouragingly. "That's wonderful, Mr. Delaney. Now, there's also the question of your property. Kelsey mentioned that managing land has become overwhelming for you. Have you thought about simplifying those responsibilities?" Tom pulled out papers from a folder on the side table. "Frank, we've been thinking about this a lot. The best solution is to consolidate family assets. You sign over your portion of the land to me, and we handle all the property management, all the taxes, all the upkeep. You can stay in your house as long as you want. No pressure, no stress." The papers he handed me were the same ones Kelsey had shown me in the garage, but now they had more signatures. Tom's name at the bottom in blue ink. Linda's beside it. A notary seal with a date from 3 days ago. They'd already committed to accepting the transfer. Had made it official. Had created a documented record of their intention to take my property. I held the papers with shaking hands, squinting at the text like I couldn't quite focus. My reading glasses were in my truck. I'd left them there deliberately. "This seems like a lot," I said. "Frank," Sharon said gently, "I think your family is offering you a gift here. They're taking on a burden so you don't have to carry it anymore. That's what families do. They take care of each other." Tom leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face earnest. "Frank, I know this is hard. But you've got to think practically. What happens if you have a medical emergency? What if you can't manage the property anymore and it goes into foreclosure? We're trying to protect you. And protect the family legacy," Linda added. Keep everything in the family where it belongs. I looked at each of them in turn. Tom with his expensive hair and his comfortable house built on unpaid debt. Linda with her cookie tray and her carefully maintained neutrality. Kelsey with her phone and her 47,000 followers waiting for the next update on the tragic old uncle who couldn't accept help. Sharon with her professional sympathy and her brochures for facilities where people went to wait for death. The thing in my chest wasn't anger. It was the feeling of tumblers clicking into place, a lock mechanism aligning. They'd given me everything I needed. Documented intent. Recorded coercion. Written evidence of their plan to take my property under the guise of elder care. All of it captured on Kelsey's phone, witnessed by a licensed social worker, notarized and dated. I let my shoulders slump. Let my voice come out thin and defeated. I need to think about it. Talk to someone. Tom's jaw tightened. Frank, who do you need to talk to? Your lawyer. Kelsey's second video dropped on Tuesday morning while I was at Dr. Morrison's office for the psychiatric evaluation Chen had arranged. The notification buzzed in my pocket as I sat across from Morrison in his consulting room, answering questions designed to assess my cognitive function and decision-making capacity. Morrison was in his 60s, gray beard trimmed close, wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his eyes slightly. His office smelled like old books and the faint medicinal scent of hand sanitizer. Can you tell me what day it is, Mr. Delaney? Tuesday, November 21st, 2026. And who is the current president? I answered his questions for 90 minutes. Named the months backward. Counted by sevens from 100. Drew a clock face showing 3:15. Explained the meaning of proverbs. Described my daily routine, my financial management system, my medication schedule, which was just blood pressure pills I took every morning with breakfast, had been for 8 years, never missed a dose. Morrison made notes on his tablet, occasionally nodding. At the end he sat back and removed his glasses, cleaning them with a small cloth he kept in his shirt pocket. Mr. Delaney, I see no evidence of cognitive impairment. Your memory is intact, your reasoning is sound, your executive function is age-appropriate. Whatever your family believes they're seeing, it's not incompetence. Can you put that in writing? I asked. He smiled slightly. Mr. Chen has already requested a formal report. You'll have it by Friday. In my truck afterward I checked my phone. Kelsey's video had 87,000 views in 4 hours. The title was "We Had to Take Action, When Elder Care Becomes a Legal Issue." I watched it sitting in Morrison's parking lot, engine idling, heat blowing stale warm air across my face. Kelsey appeared on screen wearing a dark blazer, her expression grave. After Saturday's family meeting, it became clear that Uncle Frank isn't capable of making safe decisions about his care. We tried to help voluntarily, but he's refusing all support. So today we filed a formal complaint with Davidson County Adult Protective Services. The video cut to footage of her walking into a government building, the address visible on the glass doors. She'd filmed herself filing the complaint, turned bureaucratic process into content. Her voiceover continued, "This is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But when you love someone, you do what's necessary to keep them safe, even when they can't see they need help." The comments section was full of support. "You're so brave. This must be devastating for you. My grandfather went through the same thing. Sometimes you have to save people from themselves." One comment near the top read, "Why do old people always think they know better than everyone else? Pride literally kills." I saved the video to my drive and called Chen. "She filed with APS," I said. "And documented the whole thing for her audience." Chen's voice was tight with satisfaction. "Perfect. That creates an official record of false allegations. When we prove you're competent, she's opened herself up to legal consequences." "There's more," I said. "She's claiming I'm refusing necessary care and making unsafe decisions. That's defamation with documented malice. What's our timeline now? Your cognitive testing is tomorrow. Financial audit is Thursday. By Friday we'll have a complete package proving competence. Then we file for the competency hearing she's demanding, except we use it to present the promissory note and expose the real reason she wants you declared incompetent." "How long until the hearing?" 2 to 3 weeks if we push for expedited scheduling." "Let's push," I said. The caseworker from Adult Protective Services arrived at my house Wednesday afternoon. Her name was Jennifer Torres, printed on a business card she handed me at the door. She was in her 40s, Latina, with the exhausted efficiency of someone who'd seen every variation of family dysfunction and wasn't impressed by performance anymore. Mr. Delaney, I'm here to follow up on a complaint filed by your niece regarding your living conditions and self-care capacity. May I come in? I let her inside. Didn't apologize for the dishes in the sink or the newspapers stacked on the coffee table or the dust on the television screen. Torres walked through my house making notes on a tablet, opening my refrigerator, milk, eggs, cheese, sandwich meat, all within expiration dates, checking my bathroom medicine cabinet, looking at my bed which was made, my laundry which was clean if wrinkled, my bills which were filed in folders on the kitchen counter. She sat at my table and opened a form on her tablet. Mr. Delaney, your niece alleges that you're not paying bills, that you've had memory lapses, that you're refusing necessary support. Can you address these concerns? I pulled out my file box. Showed her 6 months of bank statements with every transaction highlighted and annotated. Showed her paid utility bills, paid property tax, paid insurance premiums. Showed her my medication log where I tracked my blood pressure pills daily. Showed her my calendar where I noted appointments, grocery shopping, oil changes for my truck. Torres examined each document, cross-referencing dates, checking account balances. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to something harder. Mr. Delaney, these records show meticulous financial management and self-care. Why would your niece claim otherwise? I pulled up Kelsey's videos on my laptop. Played them both in sequence. Torres watched without comment until they finished. Mr. Delaney, she said carefully, are you aware that your niece is monetizing content about your alleged decline? I'm aware. And are you aware that false reporting to APS is a misdemeanor in North Carolina? I wasn't aware of that specific statute, but it doesn't surprise me. Torres closed her tablet with a snap that sounded like a trap shutting. Mr. Delaney, I'm going to close this case as unfounded. There's no evidence of self-neglect or impaired decision-making. In fact, your records suggest cognitive function well above average for your age. She stood, tucked the tablet under her arm. For what it's worth, you might want to consider legal action. What your family is doing, the public allegations, the pressure tactics, the false reporting, that's not concern. That's exploitation. What happens now? I asked. I file my report stating the complaint was unsubstantiated. Your niece will receive notification that the case is closed. And if she continues to make public allegations that I've verified as false, she's exposing herself to liability. Torres handed me a copy of her preliminary findings printed on county letterhead. Keep that. You might need it. After she left, I called Chen again. APS closed the case. Investigator confirmed all allegations were false and suggested I pursue legal action. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then, Frank, they're going to escalate. When Kelsey finds out APS rejected her complaint, she's going to push harder. She has to, or she looks foolish to her audience. Good, I said. Let her push. The harder she pushes, the worse it looks when we push back. Friday morning I met with an accountant Chen had hired, a meticulous woman named Patricia Vance who spent 4 hours reviewing 5 years of my financial records. Bank statements, tax returns, investment accounts, property records, insurance policies. She sat at my kitchen table with her laptop and a calculator, occasionally asking questions about specific transactions, making notes in margins. At the end she compiled a report showing total assets of $1.1 million, the house paid off and worth $380,000, my share of the land worth approximately $870,000 at current valuation, savings and retirement accounts making up the balance. She showed zero debt, perfect payment history on all obligations, and careful budgeting that resulted in a small surplus every month. Mr. Delaney, she said as she packed her laptop, your financial management is exemplary. Whoever is claiming you're incompetent either hasn't looked at your records or is deliberately misrepresenting them. It's the second one, I said. She nodded. That's actionable. I know, I said. Chen called Friday evening with the final piece. We've got everything. Morrison's psych eval shows full competence. The cognitive testing put you in the 78th percentile for your age group. Torres's APS report refutes every allegation. Vance's financial audit shows perfect management. We're bulletproof. So we file. Monday morning. I'm requesting an expedited competency hearing based on your niece's public allegations and APS complaint. The judge will schedule it within 2 weeks. And we present the promissory note. Not until the hearing. Let them think it's just about proving you're competent. Let them prepare their case about your failing memory and unpaid bills. Then when they're fully committed, we introduce the debt and watch their entire argument collapse. Chen paused. Frank, you understand what this is going to do to your family. They've already done it to themselves, I said. I'm just presenting the bill. Saturday morning Kelsey's third video appeared. This one was titled Family Intervention Failed, When the System Lets You Down. Her face filled the screen, makeup highlighting the circles under her eyes that might have been real exhaustion or... Davidson County Courthouse was old brick and marble, the kind of building constructed in the 1930s when government architecture was meant to intimidate through permanence. The hall smelled like floor wax and old wood and the accumulated anxiety of 10,000 people who'd walked through those doors hoping for justice or mercy or just an end to waiting. I arrived 40 minutes early, sat on a bench outside Department 3 and watched people flow past. Lawyers in suits carrying leather briefcases. Clerks pushing carts of files. Defendants who couldn't afford lawyers, clutching papers and looking lost. Chen arrived at 8:30, carrying his battered accordion file. He sat beside me without speaking, reviewing notes on his tablet. His suit was off the rack but clean, his tie plain blue. He didn't need expensive presentation because his work spoke. At 8:45 Tom arrived with Linda and Kelsey. They had a lawyer with them, a man in his 50s wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my truck was worth. Kelsey was dressed in a navy dress and low heels, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked younger, vulnerable, the concerned niece rather than the social media strategist. Tom wore a suit I'd never seen before, probably bought special for today. Linda was in a dark pantsuit, pearls at her throat. They looked like a respectable family worried about an aging relative. I looked like exactly what I was, an old man in his only suit, bought for Ruth's funeral 6 years ago, the shoulders slightly too wide now because I'd lost weight. Tom saw me and his face went rigid. We hadn't spoken since the phone call where I'd told him about the debt. Kelsey looked away, her jaw tight. Linda stared at a point past my shoulder. Their lawyer, whose name turned out to be Marcus Whitfield, approached Chen with a handshake and the kind of professional courtesy that preceded courtroom combat. The bailiff called us in at 9 o'clock exactly. Department 3 was wood-paneled and formal, the judge's bench elevated, the witness stand to the right, gallery seating for observers. A court reporter sat at her machine, fingers ready. 6 people were scattered in the gallery, curious locals, law students, maybe some of Kelsey's social media followers hoping to see the drama in person. Judge Patricia Hernandez entered and we all stood. She was in her 60s, Latina, gray hair cut short, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She sat and gestured us down, opened the file in front of her. This is the matter of Kelsey Richardson and Thomas Delaney petitioning for competency evaluation of Frank Delaney. She looked over her glasses at our table, then at theirs. I've reviewed the filings from both parties. Ms. Richardson, Mr. Thomas Delaney, you're requesting the court find your uncle/brother incompetent to manage his affairs. Mr. Frank Delaney, you're not contesting the evaluation but you're raising questions about the petitioner's motivations. That's correct, Your Honor, Chen said. We welcome scrutiny of my client's competence because we're confident the evidence will show he's fully capable. We're also prepared to demonstrate that this petition is not motivated by concern but by financial interest in property my client legally owns. Hernandez looked at Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield, your response. Your Honor, this is a straightforward elder protection case. Mr. Frank Delaney is exhibiting signs of cognitive decline that put him at risk. His family is seeking intervention before a crisis occurs. Any suggestion of ulterior motive is insulting and irrelevant. Let's find out, Hernandez said. Ms. Richardson, you filed the initial complaint with Adult Protective Services. Why don't you start by explaining your concerns? Kelsey took the stand. Her voice was steady, sincere. She described finding me confused in my garage, coughing uncontrollably, unable to process simple requests. She described visiting my house and finding unpaid bills, spoiled food in the refrigerator, medication bottles with incorrect dosing instructions written in my handwriting. She described phone calls where I'd forgotten conversations we'd had days earlier, where I'd repeated the same stories 3 times in 10 minutes. None of it was true. But she delivered it with the conviction of someone who believed her own narrative. Whitfield introduced her videos as evidence. The judge watched all 3 in sequence, the courtroom silent except for Kelsey's recorded voice expressing concern and documenting my decline. When they finished, Hernandez made notes without expression. Mr. Chen, your cross-examination. Chen stood. Ms. Richardson, you monetize your social media content, correct? Yes, through sponsorships and ad revenue. How much income do you derive from your social media presence annually? Kelsey hesitated. Around $30,000. And these videos about your uncle, they've been among your most popular content, haven't they? People care about elder care issues. The video titles include view counts, Ms. Richardson. Your 3 videos about your uncle have accumulated over 200,000 views combined. That's significant engagement for your platform, isn't it? I suppose. Content with high engagement generates higher revenue, correct? Objection, Whitfield said. Relevance. The petitioner's income has no bearing on whether Mr. Delaney is competent. Your Honor, Chen said, we're establishing motivation for false allegations. A competency finding would give the petitioners control over property they have financial interest in acquiring. Overruled, Hernandez said. Ms. Richardson, answer the question. Yes, Kelsey said quietly. Higher engagement can lead to more revenue. Chen pulled out a document. This is the Adult Protective Services report filed by Jennifer Torres on November 23. Ms. Richardson, are you aware that investigator Torres found all your allegations unsubstantiated? She didn't do a thorough investigation. She spent 90 minutes in your uncle's home, reviewed 6 months of financial records, interviewed him extensively, and concluded he showed meticulous self-care and financial management well above average for his age group. Her words, not mine. Kelsey's face flushed. Records can be fabricated if someone is careful. Are you testifying that your uncle fabricated bank statements, utility bills, medication logs, and medical records to deceive a county investigator? That seems like remarkably sophisticated planning for someone you claim can't remember what day it is. I don't know. But I know what I've seen. What you've seen, Chen said, or what you filmed. Because there's a difference between observing reality and constructing a narrative for an audience. Objection, Whitfield said. Argumentative. Sustained, Hernandez said, but narrowly. Mr. Chen, ask questions. Chen nodded. Ms. Richardson, in your November 30th video, you stated that the caseworker didn't see your uncle forget his brother's name. When did that allegedly occur? Last month. October. Specific date? I don't remember exactly. But you remember it happening? Yes. Chen pulled out another document. This is your uncle's phone log. On October 15th, he called your father and they spoke for 11 minutes. On October 23rd, he called again, 7-minute conversation. Both calls show normal communication patterns. If he'd forgotten his brother's name, why would he be calling him? Maybe he had the number saved in his phone. So your theory is that he forgot his brother's name but remembered how to use his phone's contact list. Kelsey's jaw tightened. I know what I saw. What you claim you saw, Chen said. No further questions. Tom took the stand next. Whitfield walked him through the family history, the joint property purchase, Tom's concern about my declining health. Tom's voice was measured, sorrowful. Frank's my older brother. I love him. But over the past year I've watched him fade. He repeats himself. He forgets commitments. Last month he missed a property tax deadline for the first time in 40 years. Your Honor, Chen said, may I? Hernandez nodded. Mr. Thomas Delaney, Chen began, You and your brother purchased 47 acres jointly in 1982, correct? That's right. And in December of 1998, you borrowed $180,000 from your brother using your half of the property as collateral, correct? Tom's face went carefully neutral. That was a family loan. So that's a yes. You signed a promissory note. Yes, but it was informal. A promissory note is a legal contract, Mr. Delaney. How many payments did you make on this loan? Tom shifted in his seat. A few. 3, to be precise. 3 payments totaling $6,000 on a $180,000 loan. Then you stopped paying. That was 24 years ago. We'd reached an understanding. What understanding was that? That it was between brothers. We take care of each other. Did you sign a release form? Did your brother provide written forgiveness of the debt? No, but we had an understanding. An understanding you're testifying to, but no documented proof. Settlement came in 17 days. Tom couldn't afford lawyers for a fight he'd already lost, and Whitfield advised him that going to trial would only make the damages worse. Chen and I met them at Whitfield's office on the day after Christmas, the building mostly empty, the parking lot a stretch of gray asphalt with ice in the corners where the sun didn't reach. The conference room had a long table and windows overlooking downtown, the city quiet in that dead week between Christmas and New Year when nobody works and everyone pretends to rest. Tom looked like he'd aged a decade. His face was drawn, the skin loose around his jaw. The expensive hair plugs seemed more obvious now, too dark against his graying temples. He didn't meet my eyes when I entered. Just stared at the stack of papers in front of him like they were a diagnosis he couldn't accept. Linda wasn't there. According to Chen, she'd filed for legal separation 3 days after the hearing, protecting her own assets before Tom's debt dragged her under. Kelsey sat beside her father, smaller somehow, diminished. Her social media accounts had gone dark the day of the restraining order. The last post was from someone on her team explaining she was taking time away for family reasons. The comments had been brutal. Hundreds of people who'd supported her elder care advocacy now calling her a fraud, a liar, a con artist using her uncle's supposed decline for profit. Her follower count had dropped to 31,000 and falling. Whitfield opened his briefcase and pulled out documents. My clients are prepared to transfer full ownership of the 47 acres to your client in exchange for satisfaction of the promissory note debt. No cash payment. Just the property. Chen slid a counteroffer across the table. Full property transfer plus $200,000 cash, paid over 5 years at 0 interest. Structured to avoid forcing immediate sale of Mr. Thomas Delaney's residence but ensuring financial accountability. Tom's voice came out hollow. I don't have $200,000. Then you'll liquidate assets, Chen said. Retirement accounts, vehicles, whatever you have. Or we proceed to foreclosure and you lose everything immediately, including your house. Kelsey spoke for the first time, her voice thin. This is cruel. You're destroying him. Your father destroyed himself, Chen said, when he stopped paying a debt 24 years ago and then tried to steal the collateral by having my client declared incompetent. We're just enforcing the contract he signed. We were family, Tom said. Still staring at the papers. You used family as an excuse not to honor your word, I said. Those were the first words I'd spoken since entering the room. Tom flinched like I'd struck him. There's a difference between forgiveness and theft. You crossed that line when Kelsey started filming me for her audience. Whitfield cleared his throat. Mr. Delaney, my client, my advice to my clients is to accept Mr. Chen's terms. The alternative is foreclosure, bankruptcy, and potential criminal charges for the fraud allegations. You're getting off easy. Easy, Kelsey said. You're taking everything. Not everything, Chen said. You get to keep the house if you make the payments. You get to avoid criminal prosecution if you comply with the settlement. And you get to rebuild your lives once you've paid what you owe. That's more than you were willing to give my client. They signed. Tom's hand shook as he wrote his name. Kelsey cried silently, tears running down her face without sound, but she signed too. The notary witnessed and stamped. Whitfield collected the papers and handed copies to Chen. It's done, he said. The property transfers to Frank Delaney. First payment of $40,000 due January 31, 2027. Subsequent annual payments continue through December 2031. Failure to pay triggers immediate foreclosure and reinstatement of the full debt with continued interest. Tom stood without speaking and walked out. Kelsey followed, pulling her coat tight around herself, not looking back. Through the window I watched them cross the parking lot to Tom's sedan, the car I'd seen in his driveway 100 times. They got in and sat there for several minutes, not moving, just two people in a car trying to process the mathematics of consequences. Then Tom started the engine and they drove away. Chen organized the papers into his accordion file. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Tired," I said. Which was true. My bones ached from sitting in the cold conference room. My knee throbbed. The fluorescent lights overhead had given me a headache that pulsed behind my eyes. But underneath the physical discomfort was something else. Not satisfaction exactly. More like the feeling of a switch flipping off, a machine powering down after running too long. The week after New Year I drove out to the land. My land now. All 47 acres, the deed transferred and recorded, my name alone on the title. No joint ownership. No promissory note. No brother with a claim he'd defaulted on a quarter-century ago. I parked at the gate and got out. The January cold bit through my jacket, the kind of chill that makes your chest hurt when you breathe. The sky was low and gray, promising snow that probably wouldn't come. The fields were brown and dormant, the pine trees dark against the pale sky. I walked the fence line like I had the day before the hearing, but this time every step was on ground that belonged to me without qualification or complication. The fence posts needed replacing. The barbed wire sagged in places. Tom hadn't maintained it well, and I'd have to pay for repairs now. But they were my repairs to make, my money to spend, my decisions about how to manage the property. Nobody could claim I was incompetent or confused or unable to handle it. The court had proven otherwise. At the northeast corner where the property bordered county land, I found the survey marker we'd placed in 1982. A piece of rebar driven into the ground, a splash of orange paint still visible after 44 years. Tom and I had stood at this spot the day we bought the land, looked out over the acres we'd purchased together, talked about what we'd build, what we'd leave to our children. Neither of us had children. Ruth and I had tried for years, doctors and treatments, and hope that eventually ran out. Tom and Linda had Marcus, who'd moved to Oregon in 2005 and called twice a year at Christmas and Tom's birthday. The land we'd planned as legacy sat empty, worth $1.2 million in assessed value and worth nothing in terms of family continuity. I stood at the survey marker and felt the wind cut through my clothes. My hands were numb. My face ached from the cold. I was 72 years old standing on land I'd paid for twice, once with cash and once with the wreckage of my relationship with my only brother. Some people would call that a hollow victory. Maybe it was. But hollow was better than stolen. Empty was better than exploited. I drove back to my house as the winter afternoon darkened. The streets were quiet, Christmas decorations still up on some houses, the lights blinking in the gathering dusk. Inside, my house was cold. I turned up the heat and made coffee in Ruth's old percolator, listened to it gurgle and hiss. The kitchen table was covered with mail I needed to sort, bills to pay, the ordinary maintenance of a life lived alone. I paid the electric bill online. Scheduled the property tax payment. Made a note to call about having the furnace serviced. The same tasks I'd done for 40 years, the mundane arithmetic of existing. My phone showed 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably reporters who'd picked up the story from court records, wanting comments about the family drama, the viral videos, the courtroom collapse. I deleted the notifications without listening to the voicemails. Outside, snow started falling. Small flakes that wouldn't amount to anything but looked pretty in the streetlight glow. I sat at Ruth's table drinking coffee and watching the snow through the window, feeling the heat from the furnace vent warm the kitchen slowly. On the wall above the sink, Ruth's clock ticked. On the refrigerator, the photo of us from our 30th anniversary, Ruth smiling, my arm around her shoulders. We'd been 55 and 53 in that picture, still healthy, still believing we had decades left. We'd had 7 years. Cancer took her fast once it started, 6 months from diagnosis to the hospice bed in our living room to the funeral where Tom gave a eulogy about family being everything. Tom hadn't visited during those 6 months. Too busy, he'd said. Work commitments. I'd forgiven that at the time because Ruth asked me to, because she believed family should forgive. But sitting in my quiet kitchen watching snow fall and drinking coffee from her mug, I understood something I hadn't let myself see before. Tom hadn't stayed away because he was busy. He'd stayed away because watching someone die reminds you of debts unpaid and promises broken, and Tom had gotten comfortable with both. He'd borrowed money he never intended to repay. He'd signed contracts he never meant to honor. He'd let his daughter destroy my reputation because it was easier than admitting he'd stolen from me for 24 years. And when I'd finally demanded accountability, he'd called me cruel. The snow fell harder now, accumulating in corners, dusting the dead grass. My coffee had gone cold. I rinsed the mug and put it in the drainer, turned off the lights in the kitchen. Tomorrow I'd pay the rest of my bills. Schedule the furnace service. Maybe drive out to Ruth's grave and clear the snow from her headstone if it accumulated enough. The